Hello, everybody. Thanks again for visiting my YouTube channel. Here we discuss the Lord's Recovery Movement of Witness Lee, also known as the local church movement. Well, shepherdingwords.com is back at it with another article, and they're taking on Lily Hsu's book, My Unforgettable Memories, where she talks about her experiences in China as a member of Watchman Nee's movement, which later, via Witness Lee, came to the United States as the Lord's Recovery Movement. And the roots of the Lord's Recovery Movement in the United States and the one that exists today all started with Watchman Nee in China. I've read Lily Hsu's book. It's a very interesting set of claims, history about the movement, about history of Watchman Nee, the origination of the Lord's Recovery Movement. And Shepherding Words has come out with an article about it, and it's kind of a strange little piece because basically they're saying that because Lily Hsu was coerced by the communists during the 50s to accuse Watchman Nee of crimes, that none of her recollections should be given credence. This is another article that seems to have been written by someone with a legal mind, because what defense lawyers try to do is induce reasonable doubt in the minds of the listeners. And rather than directly impugn Lily Hsu, they talk about the scandalous motives and actions and accusations of the communists in China, the Chinese Communist Party and the People's Republic of China. And all that, I think most people accept, that that was a heinous and evil regime that would stop at nothing and would tell any lie to further their cause, and saw Watchman Nee, the charismatic leader of his movement, who was revered and uplifted and considered by many to be infallible. They considered him a threat, so they had to get rid of him. He wasn't the only Christian leader they got rid of. But they seem to be saying that because Lily Hsu was influenced by these people, that all of her memories and all of the things she experienced should be held in suspicion. Well, let's take a step back from this a little bit. Here's a woman who's near the end of her life. She's elderly now, in her 80s, and she decides to write a book about what happened to her life in China with Watchman Nee. And she's been revitalized as a Christian after going through all this trauma with the local church and with communists. She fell away from the Lord for a while, but she had a rebirth. She came to the United States and she resumed her Christian life, and apparently has gotten a lot of respect from the Chinese Christian community because there are a lot of endorsements at the beginning of the book. And her spirit in the whole writing is very humble. It's not offensive. There's not any kind of arrogance about it. So the question is, why would she at the end of her life write a book with lies in it? Why would she impugn Watchman Nee at the end of her life? What would be the point of that? Now, you have to realize that this is another life for her. She came to the United States, she married a different man, and she got involved with a group of new friends and Christian associates who had no common history with her. She could have started a new life and she could have gone to a grave not talking about this. Most people, if they were in the wrong, they would just forget it. And why would she risk her reputation by writing this? So you have to think that she had a good reason to write it. So I think what she's doing is, from the standpoint of her memories, she is just doing her best to show what really happened back then, what was going on. And she, a lot of times, she says, I don't know. She asks questions. For example, when she talks about Watchman Nee carrying for a long time a nude picture of this Chinese woman, Miao Yunchun, she asks, why did he carry that so long? Why did he want it? What was the point of it? And she talks about how the night that he took the picture, he had a car and photographic equipment. She asks the question, did he have enough money to have these things? So she acknowledges that there are questions in the story, yet she herself sat down in the living room after all this was over, when Miao was in her 60s and Watchman Nee was in jail, and Miao again, told the story of what happened. And there was another woman named Phoebe Chang, also known as Zhang Quinyan, and she claimed that Nee raped her. So what are we to make of all this? Why would Lily Hsu write this book? What are we to make of all of this? Well, to me, The question is not so much of proving or not proving whether Watchman Nee had these illicit affairs. I think it's safe to say that most of the accusations the communists brought against him were mutations and creations of their own evil intent. And I don't think anybody thinks that's the point of the book, to paint out Watchman Nee to be a person like what the communists accused him of being. The real question to me is, what's the lesson of the whole story? What is the lesson of this? And if you look, once again, you see this thread of power and authority getting a movement in trouble. And you see the roots of it in Chinese thinking. For example, the patriarchal attitude of the Chinese culture, the attitude that you don't accuse the great father figure of anything, this need to submit, the need to be a little cog in the wheel of the great machine, and that's your purpose in life, is just to be a little cog. There was a quote talking about Nee's alleged affairs and dalliances where someone says, talking about the women, they could not tolerate the shame of exposure of themselves because of the Chinese tradition. Covering it up was the culture of that time. The saying was, domestic shame should not be made public. Well, that dovetails right in with Witness Lee's doctrine of covering sin, which he applied to the Noah story and Noah's curse. This thing about covering sin. And this stuff comes from Chinese culture. And you see the fruit of it. Watchman Nee was disciplined and excommunicated by the church in Shanghai in the early 1940s, and he was publicly shamed. And Lily Hsu's story is it had to do with the immorality. It also had to do with some money issues with his chemical company. Well, Witness Lee's story was that the elders were rebelling against the great Watchman Nee and were wrong. Watchman Nee reemerged in the late 40s, re-energized as a leader, and that's when he started his talk about the minister of the age and apostleship, and the start of the movement that all the church members should hand over their lives and their property and their time and their devotion to the church, but really to this ministry, which was him. And so, well, why didn't he do that? Well, it's pretty easy to put the pieces together and realize he had to emerge as a much more powerful figure than what the church in Shanghai saw him as before. And so he created this doctrine about being the ministry age and being above discipline from churches. And that carried over to Witness Lee, who brought it to the United States. So really, to me, the whole lesson is seeing the fruit of this whole mindset. The problem with the Lord's Recovery and the problem with that movement in China is their basic rules are flawed. The whole thing with authority is completely flawed. They're always trying to figure out who they're supposed to submit to. Who's the boss? And they start arguing about who's the boss. And the bosses start arguing about who's the boss. And there's this big fight and accusation about who's in the lead, who's the minister of the age, who's got the authority, who am I supposed to submit to? Oh, let's all get in line under this guy. We got to be under somebody. They got to be under somebody. No, you do not have to be under somebody. You need to be under God. And if you're under God, He will tell you who to cooperate with to get His purposes accomplished. You do not need to be in some kind of system with some poobah at the top, because the fruit of it is clearly seen in China, and now it's clearly seen in the United States, and don't fall for it. The problem is the whole mindset. It's like, if you could imagine Christianity or life in God's kingdom is a game. Let's say it's football, and you're supposed to be playing football on the football field. Well, what Watchman Nee and Witness Lee are doing and what the Lord's Recovery is doing is they're trying to play baseball on a football field. Their whole base rules are wrong, of authority, are completely wrong-headed. This twisted view of authority and thinking they have this authority and thinking somebody's got to have this authority and somebody's got to be in ministry age and you got to get under somebody and who's the boss and let's fight over it and what's the right church. And we all got to be one. Well, what are we going to be one under? Well, we got to be one under somebody. We say it's this guy. You say it's that guy, well, you're wrong. You're reprobates. And this is what the Lord's recovery is. It's just a big mess of people with a screwed up vision of authority. Okay? It's not the New Testament. That attitude is not a New Testament attitude. And if you read Watchman Nee, he would cook things up right on the spot. He was so confident in his brain and his mind and his ability to reason. And you see it happening in this book. You see him running up against things and just inventing things on the fly. Like when there was all this crisis with the government and with communists. And Watchman Nee came out with this idea. He used to be aloof from politics, but suddenly decided, no, you can't be aloof from politics. And he gave this pseudo-spiritualization of why suddenly it was okay. But really, it was just him reasoning and rationalizing and cooking something up. And of course, since he's the minister of the age, he's got a bunch of people hook, line, and sinker that don't even think about it because they've been sold on this idea that you're supposed to follow somebody without questioning. That is a recipe for disaster. Okay, and that's what the Lord's recovery is. Don't be a dumb sheep following another sheep. If you're going to be a sheep, follow the shepherd, not another sheep. Okay, sheep are dumb. I had a friend who actually was a sheep herder for a while. His family had a sheep farm for a while. He said sheep are the stupidest animals in the world. He said they're born looking for a place to die. Well, as a sheep, you don't need to be following another stupid sheep. You need to be following the shepherd. Follow Jesus. Follow God. Listen for his speaking from other sheep. But Lord's Recovery's whole idea of authority is you give this guy credit for knowing everything. And you say, well, his way, right or wrong, let's go. If we go off the cliff, we all go off together, and that's the lesson. Was Watchman Nee adulterous? Was he sexually promiscuous? It's very possible. He's a fallen man. He fits the profile. Usually somebody with a lot of power and charisma and then gets people to respect him and kiss his feet like he did. He's eventually going to try to sample the honeypot. It happens. It's unusual that it doesn't happen. And so this article is really all about the co-workers of the Lord's Recovery in North America, aka the Blended Brothers, aka the Living Stream Ministry Defense and Confirmation Project, again rushing to the barricades. It's a pretty weak attempt at getting you to doubt Lily Hsu. There's no reason to doubt that she's conveying things to the best of her ability. Was she wrong for accusing Watchman Nee? Probably, yeah. The way that she agreed with the communists, yeah. But I think she was deeply disappointed in Watchman Nee. I think she had evidence that convinced her that he was sexually deviant, and she was disgusted with him. As a young person who really had been trained by the local church to follow somebody and be a sheep, and she was trying to figure out who to follow. She was trying to figure out who was right. And at that moment in her life, she'd lost faith in Watchman Nee. She'd lost trust in him. Is it her fault that Watchman Nee went to jail? No, he was going to go to jail no matter what. They were going to dig up somebody. So it's not her fault. But the idea that we should doubt her story in this book because of that, I think is a stretch. I don't see any reason why she would have written this book at this late date without having an honest reason to do it. So to me, the lesson is, like Paul said, don't be servants of men. Don't lift these guys up as minister of the ages, follow them without questioning, because they're just as fallible as you, and they can make the same mistakes you can. If God has blessed somebody with a ministry, that's great, but that doesn't add 1 ounce to their real character. It's been proven time and time and time again. If the lesson of church history is anything, it's don't follow a man as if he's infallible. It's not prescribed in the New Testament that we have to do that. There's nothing that says that we have to latch on to the super ministry of the age and listen to it because it's all that and it's the only thing going on. That's just a false teaching. It started with Watchman Nee because he was trying to reassert his authority in that movement after they had been excommunicated. Really, what's ironic about all this is what the communists did is what the Lord's Recovery does now, in principle. They use propaganda to try to push their agenda and try to accuse people. They talk about the communists imprisoning and making false accusations. Hey, what about the Philip Lee scandal? Isn't that what you guys did? What about Witness Lee's book, The Fermentation of the President of Rebellion? Any communist propagandist would have been proud of that book. And here we are at shepherdingwords.com, full circle. It's a bunch of propaganda. Good grief, guys. This thing's about as honest as a used car salesman whose mortgage is overdue. Let it go. Move on. Get a life. Get a job. Do something worthwhile with your life besides try to siphon money from people that you've convinced that you are some kind of special movement of God. I could go on and on with this, but I'll let you go for today. Once again, thanks for listening. Take care.